freaking scared. Great. Thanks everyone for coming to the Sunny's Book Club for July. We read Brat by Gabriel Smith. And I am going to start us off reading the back cover blurb to kind of resituate us ourselves into the book. It's been a while since you've read it. We meet our ill-tempered protagonist, the story's titular Brat, at a low moment, but not yet at rock bottom. The Gabriel of the novel is mourning the death of his father, as well as a recent breakup, and struggling to finish writing his second book. Alone and aimless, he agrees to move back into his parents' house and clear it out for sale. Here, the cliches end. Gabriel has trouble delivering on his promises. As the moldy, overgrown house deteriorates around him, so does his own health, and large sheets of his skin begin to peel from his body at a terrifying rate. In Fragments and Figments, Gabriel takes us on a surreal journey into the mysteries of the family home, where he finds unfinished manuscripts written by his parents that seem to mutate every time he picks them up, and a bizarre home video that hints at long-buried secrets. Strange people and figures emerge, perhaps directly from the novel's embedded fictions, and despite his compromised state and his more successful brother's growing frustration, Gabriel is determined to try to make sense of these hauntings. Part ghost story, part grief story, flirting with the autofictional mode while sitting squarely in the tradition of the Gothic, Brat crackles with deadpan humor and delightfully taut prose. That is Brat. I would love to start us off with just general impressions and how we got along with this book. I'm going to call on you guys. Brittany's going to go first.
I was wondering if someone would start it off on a more positive note. I mean, I don't know. It just wasn't really for me. I think I really appreciated, the getting a little experimental and testing out different forms, but not really what I'm looking for in a book. I kind of want to feel more connected to the characters and maybe walk away with a new perspective, and it felt a little too matter of fact for me, and maybe I also don't like being in a headspace like that. I kind of struggle with darker books. So yeah, I think could appreciate it, but it just wasn't. I don't think it's one I'm going to think about a lot or go back to.
Cool. What about you, Catherine?
Can you hear me okay? I have my headphones in.
Yeah, totally.
Okay. Sorry, I'm on a deck because we're kind of visiting family right now. It's kind of a vacation, but it's kind of not. So I'm in a weird spot. But I didn't hate it. I didn't love it. What I think I sort of took away from it is I think I would read something by him again, and I would like to see where sort of the second book goes, and I would like to also see what other people sort of do with a similar form. I feel like there was stuff that maybe I missed, culturally speaking, maybe a little bit, or maybe he just had an idea in his mind of symbolism. But with the deer and stuff, obviously that was a symbol, but I was maybe I wanted something a little more concrete. It made me think of Fleabag with the fox, and foxes sort of mean something specific over in England, and it felt a little uneven to me, but it wasn't an unpleasant experience. I think that's my thoughts. That was a little chopped up, but so was the book.
Totally. Yeah, Maya, do you want to speak to your reading experience? We can't hear you. We can't hear you still. Hopefully Maya has something positive to say. Jess, maybe you go while Maya's figuring out her audio.
Sounds good. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Awesome. I hated it. I did not like it. And I'm sorry. Because, and I don't think the author is a terrible writer on purpose, because the embedded narratives were really good and I liked those, and I wish he just would have wrote it that way. I feel like it would have made it way better, instead of it was marketed as a Gen Z type book, right? It's like very for like, I don't know, the younger people. Not that we're all old, but I mean, I feel like we're all generally still young, but like not in our early 20s anymore. I honestly felt like I was reading a first draft of like a sophomore English paper. And so those are my thoughts on
Just hated it.
I
You know who I know didn't hate it? Lizzie, because Lizzie loved it so much she bought a physical copy. Lizzie,
I'm
where
so-
have you been, Loca? Also,
I'm so sorry, Lizzie.
Oh, I'm not even muted. I haven't been muted. So I'm off social media. I'm exploring what it's like to not be online. But
God.
I still check the book club. I've read like more than this for the Sunny's book club. I just haven't been able to make it to the Zooms.
Well, we miss you. It's a blast from the past. You're an OG.
Thank you.
We're
I
just
did love
starting
it. I
off.
loved
Yeah, we're just starting off. So I'd love to hear you and your experience with Brat.
Me or anyone?
You.
Me. Okay. So yeah, I check like what is the Sunny's book club pick like on the first of the month every month, because then I try to get it on Libro FM, which if anyone doesn't know, it's kind of like Audible, but instead of supporting Amazon, it actually supports Sunny's. So you can select a local bookstore that you want it get a percentage of your monthly payment to go to. So I checked. Actually, you know what? I did check Libby first, but usually Libby has like months and months wait.
Totally.
However, for this specific instance, I was like the first one to get it on Libby. Normally I do support Sunny's. Anyway, and then I did buy like the physical copy because I liked it so much that I wanted to see what it was like to read it physically. So let me just tell you, the audiobook narrator, bow down to this man, like reads it in the most convincing depression, grief tone. It like immediately hooked me.
Ooh.
Even when I read it later, I like had that voice in my head reading it. So it was a perfect pairing.
I love that.
Yeah, I just thought the way I guess I kind of missed what Jessica was saying about
Well,
why
no
you
one
did
has
that.
liked it so far.
Okay.
Except you.
So I'll tell you that
You don't want to hear what I was saying since you like it so much.
I can take it. I can take it.
Okay.
I thought it was not only the best depiction of grief that I've ever read, I thought it accurately showed what it's like to to be comfortable at rock bottom.
Mm.
And it made me laugh out loud. So if you can do all those things, it's like it's in my top 10 of the year.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Wow, this is a divisive book club. What about you, Maya?
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. I had to call in. I don't know how to work technology. I think I lean more on the side of I enjoyed it. It did make me think a lot. I read reviews afterwards because I was like, what did I just read? I really enjoyed the pacing. I actually enjoyed all of the different narrative styles in it. I thought that was really fun. It kept it upbeat for me, even though the content was so challenging. And I would have to agree, I haven't experienced grief recently, so I can't speak to it, but I think it was an interesting depiction of grief that sounded relatable and like something that I would maybe experience. But I will say, the more I look back on it, even though I enjoyed the book when I was reading it, the more I feel like it was like a lot of writing prompts put together. And there were certain elements like the symbolism of the deer that just weren't fleshed out enough for me. And maybe that's a good thing, but I think there were a few key parts missing for me to enjoy this into the future.
Awesome. Yeah, I did not like this either. And I'm trying to articulate it in a way where it's like useful for conversation. I think my issue with it isn't really the tone, because I read you know, bratty, depressed narrators all the time who hate their lives and are, you know, really at the bottom and just wallowing with themselves. And I liked the pacing of it, and how kind of like quickly and whirlwindy it felt to read, and how that kind of relates to, you know, themes of grief. I think my problem with it, and something that I would like love, I read this like 2 months ago also. I'm always reading ahead for book club. So if some of you finished this more recently, I would love your to refresh my memory on this. But the different forms going on in this book, I am not the most experimental reader, but we do love a frame narrative at Sunny's book club, and there's a couple of different ones going on, and I literally genuinely don't know why. And like what they're what he was trying to do with them and what was happening in them. So obviously the mother is, her manuscripts have been discovered, right? So is it like a generational ghost story curse, and like that's what this is, and that's the inclusion of said manuscript, and then the manuscript content with like the kids? I don't know, do any of you have any understanding of kind of what was at work here and what we think Gabriel Smith was doing with, I guess we could start with the manuscript, his mother's manuscript, before we get into like the home video.
Yeah, I mean, I wonder if there was a specific intention or one specific thing you're supposed to take out of this, but it did make me think about how when you are grieving, or you know, you say goodbye to someone, different people's perspective on them can be really enlightening to you. You can find out things about them that you had no idea about, that maybe changes your view on them. I guess that was kind of my first thought, but I feel like it could be taken so many different ways.
I considered it just another Gothic trope, because in a lot of Gothic literature, the house is alive. And so with him, writing is a big part of his family. And so a lot of things that happen within the manuscripts that he finds, and even in other media like the video, the VHS tape that he finds, it just ties back into how the house is like consuming him and how his body's reacting to that. So those are all like Gothic tropes as well. So I think it was just more to hone in on the Gothic aspect. At least that's how I took it. So, and then just again to tie back into like the themes of grief and everything, and, you know, hidden secrets and, you know, stuff like that, which is more Gothic tropes, you know, like family, you know, heirlooms or whatever. And like, I feel like the manuscript was like representative of that in a big way.
Yeah. And I guess
kind of
oh, go ahead.
I kind of thought it was as far as like sort of a clicking moment for me, his brother was not willing to like sort of look at the manuscript, and then when he did, he didn't see anything. And obviously Gabriel had a very different relationship with the manuscript and probably with grief in general, and they were grieving in two different ways. And some people obviously with grief refuse to like kind of address it, look at it, remember things. They just don't want to think about it. And his brother even kind of says that point blank. And then obviously Gabriel's kind of working through his shit. So that was kind of what I thought. But I do think obviously the Gothic trope was a big part of it. But I thought it was sort of massaging that point of how people, you know, grieve differently, especially within like a family unit.
I like that. You guys are so smart.
I like that you guys are talking. Oh,
no, go ahead, Lizzie.
I like that you guys are talking about the Gothic tropes within this. And I think that what was just brought up was about the manuscript and about how the brother saw it differently. And I think that there were so many things in this that just couldn't be believed, right? Like his skin is coming off. There's like the two kids. Of course, there is like pills involved in this novel. So take that with what you will. But I think it's another metaphor for how when you're in those stages of grief, and when you're in that level of depression, and people will say they understand and like, oh, like I'm here, like I know what you're going through, and there's like nothing that they can say that will get you to realize that they do know what you're going through. Like you are alone, like you're the only one who's ever experienced heartbreak, you're the only one who's ever experienced grief. And I think the fact that Gabriel, the character or the author, kept going back to things where people just didn't believe him, like the doctors didn't believe him, his family didn't believe him, is really telling of that grief.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think this book was really effective of portraying that alienation you feel when you're grieving, like what you mentioned.
I did like that moment when he goes to that doctor. It's like towards the end, and he's talking about the skin peeling off, and the doctor was like, well, like, is anything happening with it? Like, is it like, you know, bleeding? Or he's like, no, it's just happening. And she's like, I think that's okay. And that was like kind of honestly a very, I thought that was probably one of the best parts of the book, because sometimes you just have to work through stuff and only time can pass, and sort of those waves, and you just have to ride it out.
What do you guys think? I guess my interpretation of the skin peeling, like outside of just the fact that it's like body horror and like an interesting thing to be happening in a book, is he had to have some like physical grounding to his character, because so much of this is like, I don't know, interior and also placed onto the house. Again, like going back into the Gothic setting. What was your interpretation of the skin peeling, and what did that represent or like mean for you in your reading? And also, what do we think about body horror?
I'm cool with body horror. I think it's good. I think it's funny a lot of the times, and creepy, just like creepy as fuck. I think the skin peeling, for me, I interpreted as the skin that he was peeling off was like his experience and his memories that he had with his, I can't remember, I read it a while ago, his dad, I think, that died, not his mom. And it peeling off as he was reading these manuscripts and watching the videos, going through like being okay and processing those memories as he was peeling it off, because like mentioned, it wasn't doing anything bad. Like it kept almost getting infected and being really gross and horrible, but then it would just wash away. And that particular act of it just disintegrating, for me, I was like, he's just releasing that part in a positive way, not a negative way.
I agree. I don't think there's, at least for me personally, I don't think there's anything deeper to it happening. It is like just anytime anything happens, it's just washing away technically from his skin and from his experiences. And at first I thought it was like legitimate. I was like, oh my God, his skin's coming off, but it's more psychological than that. Like, it wasn't actually happening, because, he's experiencing these things in his own head and nobody else is experiencing them the way he is. And so again, it leads back to what Lizzie was saying and everyone else with the alienation. It's just something that he's going through. And I think something with his mom too, because he's like anticipating her death. He mentions that a lot. And so that probably adds to the layers, no pun intended, of his skin coming off. So I think that's a pretty good explanation for the skin thing.
Yeah, this feels really obvious now, but like the manuscript shifting obviously is a callback to his mom's memory and dementia deteriorating, which I do think is interesting now that I'm thinking about it. There's a couple of fun side characters in this, one being the girlfriend. I loved the girlfriend. I loved her weird masturbation story that she put in that art magazine with the Russian oligarch. and the grandma and the brother and the brother's wife, right? So did any of those characters in particular like stick out to you guys, or were they memorable in any way? Did you have a favorite? Did they bring something new to the book that our depressed narrator, couldn't?
So I thought that the sibling dynamic was articulated really well, and it made me laugh again and again. Because here's the thing. When I go back to like visit my parents, and I imagine this would also be true if there was like a death in the family. When I go back to even just like be around my parents, I start acting like a teenager.
Yeah.
And these guys were like picking on each other, calling each other gay, like physically fighting with each other, like making faces, intentionally pushing each other's buttons. And it just made me laugh so much about how that is how young siblings behave. And that's how these two adult men were behaving.
And I think he's like in the place of his childhood, right? So he's just like regressed to a point where he's like, I cannot take care of anything. Like, I'm not packing up the house. I'm gonna sit here and rot. And I'm the younger brother, so that's my right. I loved him in his being combative with the wife. He's like, no, fuck you. I forget what he said, but whatever he said, it had to like lash out and then apologize for. Yeah, there were a couple funny moments in here. I'm super curious to listen to at least part of the audiobook now that you said that it was so well done. I feel like their dialogue would be really fun to listen to.
Yeah, I feel like I thought his interactions with strangers or more removed characters were funny. Like when I don't remember exactly, he gets in the fight with the woman in purple or something at the funeral, and then there's that interaction where he sees a stranger die, I think, but the guy winks at him. And he like thinks he's faking it. Like some of those, I don't like. I guess I understand like why the violence was included, but yeah, there was some of those details that were funny, but I didn't quite understand why they were included.
I forgot about the weird little situation with the coworker that acts like he's dying and then like the guy really dies. I forgot that was also very strange.
Yeah.
Maybe that's the Gen Z humor in the marketing of this book. I'm like, okay, maybe that's the funnies.
It's the I think you should leave humor.
Yeah,
Oh.
definitely. I was reading interviews. I don't know if any of you guys read the ones that I linked in the Discord before this, but there was one where the author was talking about his ADHD and kind of his like neurodivergence and his attention span, and how he was like, I literally couldn't write a linear book if I tried. Like, it's just not in my working style and not how my brain works. So that's why I had to format it this way. Like the pages are, even when it's from his point of view, it's so short, it's so quick, and like that rhythm made this really readable, I guess I would say, in conjunction with the different forms within it. How did you guys like reading it? Like, it was really almost like thrillery to me because it was so pacey. Yeah, I guess I'm just curious if like that felt good to you. It felt really dissimilar to other stuff I read, so I'm just curious if it felt new to y'all as well.
I think it did feel kind of like a thriller, especially with the manuscript parts and the parts where he was trying to figure out what was happening in them, and like if he has these half brother and sister out there somewhere, or if it was just all in his head. Or so it did feel like a thriller in that sense. And in the pacing, with that part I did like, because I like when books, I may not have liked it like as a whole, like just overall, like it wasn't something that like I probably wouldn't read this again, but I did like that it was a quick read and that it does leave a lot for discussion. Like it's a really good book to talk about format wise, plot wise, because the thing is, I really liked the plot. I really, really liked the plot. It just wasn't for me style wise. And I feel like if he would have wrote it in the way he wrote the manuscripts, I feel like I would have latched onto this way more. But I did read that first interview that you sent, and he did talk about how he couldn't stay in one room either when he was writing. So he would have to move rooms as well. And so I feel like that reflects a lot in the style too. And nothing against people with ADHD, but I'm like, wow, kudos to you for operating with a brain like that, because I cannot honestly, like, They're troopers.
Yeah, I think I struggle with it because I read to like really focus on something and not like really help my attention span. And so I think that the pacing was a little, it made it really readable, like you mentioned, but it made it a little too fast for me. And I think if it's just moving that quickly, I'm not going to get as invested and then not, I don't know, really feel connected to the story. But it was fun to read a book in that format, and I do agree it's a good book club pick. I think lots to discuss.
There was a question that the interviewer asked the author that I just want to ask us because I think it's fun. But in Brat, there's little distinction between decay and growth. Skin falls off, walls crumble, plants overgrow, mold proliferates, seemingly opposite processes that both seem to threaten characters' lives as they understand them. Do you have any strong feelings for or aversion to the natural world? That's a big question, obviously. So maybe we say the natural world within books. Like, how did nature in this book and kind of living organisms affect your reading of it, or I don't know, your understanding of larger themes of grief within this and renewal?
I don't know if I'm answering your question, but maybe. Like how some other people were saying there were some gothic ties to this, which I also didn't pick up on until you said it, and now it's like, duh, Lizzie. I'm remembering when I read Rebecca, I was so struck by the description of all the plants, like the fauna surrounding the house. And so I think maybe like the growth there kind of has to do with also the eventual decay. And I think that does make sense in terms of comparing this to a gothic novel.
Yeah, I was gonna say the same thing. That again, it just for me, it ties back into the whole gothic trope of, that cycle of, life in terms of the nature, because nature plays a big part in it. It made me think of Wuthering Heights for some reason because of like, I think it was just the house.
Yeah.
Or am I thinking about a different book? I don't know. Maybe it's because it's a gothic trope, so it's like it's evident in a lot of gothic literature. So it just makes me think of all those gothic stories with the house and the vines and like things are growing where they shouldn't be, like grass or like a flower growing through concrete or something like that. It gave me that kind of vibes, and so I think it just ties back into the whole gothic stuff too, like how we were saying before.
Yeah, and I think if you're like, there's a problem when you're grieving, if you're trying to force yourself to feel great or like numb yourself and not address those feelings. But if you let it take over or like let yourself feel those things, or like in this case, let the house and nature do what they're going to do, like it can lead to something beautiful. But yeah, it's really hard. And I think I even maybe struggle with this book too, because it's hard to feel those bad feelings, even if you're just reading it from someone else's perspective, but it is important to acknowledge them.
I did like the strong sense of place in it because that is like something I kind of like in books and movies and media or whatever. I did have the weirdest like vibe from it. I was like, this weirdly reminds me of Train Spotting, which I haven't seen since college, so it's been like 10 years now. But now I feel like I have to go back and watch it because I was like, I don't know why, if it's just the British guys down bad or what, but
I haven't seen that in a while either. Have any of y'all read Sisters by Daisy Johnson? No, I recommend that book all the time. It's like the girly pop version of this book. It's two sisters who are in like a haunted house on the English countryside, like literally losing their mind over grief. I think if you liked this, you would love that book. It has maybe less gothic, more magical realism maybe, but the house itself still is like a really strong character within the book, which I also agree with. I loved. Catherine, you were talking earlier about like missing some cultural context of England and kind of, you know, what that added like
Yeah.
add to the book. And I was reading an interview with him, and basically he was like, this is set in a house that's like in a shitty commuter town outside of London. And it's essentially like a big stately, you know, upper middle class home where the kids have all gone, and now it's just like the parents in this big empty house who have no one and nothing to fill it with, and like all the life has left out of it. So I liked that add onto the reading of like contextualizing where he was situating this house and like who owns it and like where their emptiness is in their life. So I don't know. I thought I would say that. I guess lastly, it's kind of short. I don't really have any more pointed questions, but I would love for us to talk about the deer. Your understanding of the deer, what the deer meant to you, if anything.
I cannot contribute because I also have questions about the deer.
Yeah.
What does deer mean in literature? I don't know.
What is deer?
What is deer? So would love some insight on someone that does know.
I don't know, but I have an idea. So a deer would be like a very gentle animal that's usually afraid of humans. And I think it's just yet another way for the author to show that this narrator would rather be going crazy and imagining a deer human outside than experiencing what he's actually experiencing, which is intense grief and depression.
Mm-hmm.
And the deer is kind of like a safe thing that he's created.
See, when I think of deer, I think of like scary movies where the deer comes out from the woods on the side and then the car veers off and they find a cabin that they have to stay at and then they get murdered. That's what I think of when I think of deer. So I'm like, how does that fit into this?
I guess it's like sacrifice too, right? Like
Yes.
sacrificial, yeah, like prey animal or something.
And I know a lot of like cultures will say it's like sort of like innocence, and he like keeps seeing this pop in and out, and then his grandmother is kind of the only one that's like, oh yes, there it is, which I thought that was kind of a nice touch too. But I wasn't sure. That's why I was saying, I was like, I feel like maybe in England whole fox.
We lost you, Catherine. Sorry, my dog's freaking out. His father just got home. Yeah. Sorry, he's like slamming his face into his food bowl. Any other thoughts on Brat? Anything we didn't talk about that you want to uncover as a group on this call?
I just remembered the like civilian whales and spy whales thing that came up with his grandma and I think his mom too. I just thought those little moments were funny.
Yeah, there's obviously a lot of humor in this book, and I'm excited to see like what he does next. And then in reading his interviews too, like he talked about how he wrote this book for his mentor who died, like his writing mentor, before he got to publish it. So I think that's really present in, you know, all of this work. And he also was really rejecting autofiction in this, which I always think is so silly when writers name a character their name and then they're like, oh, and I'm like, okay.
He said that in the interview too, right? He's like, let's not go there. Let's not use that word. And I'm like, but the character has your name.
And then
Just a coincidence.
And then the character begins the novel with the exact same line that this novel begins with.
Exactly. Yeah, it's so silly goofy.
I did want to talk about the mentor because I noticed that at the back of the book that it said he was mentored by the late Giancarlo Di Trapano of Tyrant Books. And I have never seen that before in a book. So it made me want to look up who that was. And I found out that Giancarlo was kind of like an independent publisher of just books that he thought most big companies wouldn't want, which obviously this one is published by Penguin. But most of them were, can you hear me? I'm not even green. Oh, okay. Books that were like kind of avant-garde, like things that were maybe a little bit taboo, and wanted to support those type of authors. So I thought that was really cool. And then he just died a mysterious death at age 47 in a hotel room.
Oh, I didn't know that. I figured he was old. That's more sad. Yeah, I think Tyrant magazine is like a cool experimental fiction, like last of its kind of publication that puts new young writers on the map. So I'm glad it's doing it for people like him.
It made me want to read more books that were published under Tyrant Books for sure.
Totally. Yeah. Whenever someone's doing something cool and is labeled as provocative, I'm like, okay. Anyone else? Anything else we didn't talk about you want to chat about?
I'll just chat about the t-shirts just to make it like a little bit of a longer video for you. But I thought that the t-shirts were the funniest things. Like the first one was where he's going to the funeral and the brother's like, or no, not brother, the brother's wife was like, are you gonna wear that? And he's like, what? It's my shirt with all the Phils on it. And it had like Philadelphia, Phil, the Philippines, the concept of philanthropy, Philadelphia, the spread, the London Philharmonic, and Prince Philip. And then the other one was on page 49. Hang on, because some of the page numbers aren't always here.
Oh, the broccoli one?
I put on a t-shirt with an anthropomorphized broccoli on it. The broccoli was wearing sunglasses and doing finger guns, and below him it said bro in big black letters. On the back of the t-shirt was another broccoli, also anthropomorphized. This broccoli was wearing ski gear and sunglasses, and the black writing this time said bro.
I can really envision that. This actually reminded me when I met my husband 10 years ago, there was a tank top in his closet and it was yellow and it had a koala on it and it said koalified to party. And I was like, literally, what the fuck is this? Like, is this yours? And he was like, my sister got it for me. I've never worn it, but like, I'm not going to throw it away. And it was like, okay, this is a choice. So I would love to know if any of you have a memory of a disgusting graphic t-shirt like that that's just burned into your mind. No one?
My brother has one of those cat t-shirts. I forget what the brand is, but it's the Happy Pills one where the cats are like falling out of the like medicine bottle or whatever. He was just wearing it the other day. I think it's like 15 years old at this point.
Oh my gosh.
And the shirt with Brat on it was only mentioned once, right? And then that's what the book is named. Like there's not anything else I'm missing.
I think so.
Oh, something I did want to talk about was how I guess it was rumored that Charlie XCX named her album after this book, and then she tweeted her out saying like, I actually never heard of you, but good luck, babe, or something like that.
Well, he made his own marketing like tweet where he faked an email from her.
Oh,
which is so funny.
I
Like
was so confused. I was like, wait, so did she or did she not? Or was it just like a marketing thing? But I read that in the interview you sent, and I was like, oh my God, that's actually really funny.
I know. Great timing for him culturally to name his book. He couldn't have predicted it, but it was something. All right. Well, thanks, guys. kind of a weirder one. I'm curious to see how you all get on with, if you read next month, The Coin. I actually liked it way more than I thought I would, and it's also absolutely so dissimilar to the way it's been blurbed and marketed. So I think like some people will like that and some people will really struggle with it. But I was like, okay, that's like the way the book jacket description is like maybe 5% of the plot, and they really are just like trying to hook people in with like a scheme, but that's really not what the book's about at all. So interesting, very interesting. Weird summer of books at Sunny's over here. Thanks for coming. Have a good night. Have a Brat summer. And goodbye.
Thanks.
Bye.